Hello, everyone. Welcome to World Affairs' fifth program in our Elections 2020 series. Until Election Day, World Affairs is holding a series of virtual conversations on key issues affecting our democracy, like housing, healthcare, disinformation, and the role of media, along with key global policy challenges like climate change, the changing US role in the world, and our relations with China, Russia, and countries in the Middle East. We're glad to see you're all eager to learn about some of our most pressing issues at home and abroad before casting your vote this November. Today we'll be discussing youth activism and our newest generation of voters. I'm Julia Kwasnitsa, Program Officer here at World Affairs, and I'm delighted to introduce our moderator and panel today. And we're so glad you all could join us. I'm excited to hear what's on the minds of our panelists as we approach this incredibly important election in November. Our moderator today is Ben Wessel. He's the executive director at NextGen America, which fights for progressive change by growing and wielding the grassroots power of young people in elections. Prior to being named executive director at NextGen last July in 2019, Ben worked in various roles at the organization, including organizing, digital, and political departments starting in 2014. Before NextGen, Ben worked for Cory Booker's campaign for US Senate in New Jersey. Welcome, Ben. I'm so glad you can join us. I'm gonna, hand it over to you now so that you can dive into the conversation and round out the intros of our panelists today.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia, and thanks everyone for being here. Like Julia mentioned, my name is Ben. I use he, him pronouns. I'm here in San Francisco, and I'm gonna ask the panelists to introduce themselves as well. We're hopefully gonna have one more panelist join us. But life is crazy this close to the election, so if it's just the three of us, it's going to be intimate and cute. Before I get our panelists to introduce themselves, I want to make sure everyone who is joining us is familiar with the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If this is your first time on a Zoom, congrats, you made it. But I also want to encourage you to utilize that Q&A box if you ever have a question that you want to ask one of the panelists, like where did we get our cool t-shirts, or what's the deal with Julian's awesome painting. Feel free to throw it in the Q&A and I'll make sure to ask it of the crew. But I think we should just jump right in. And so it's my honor to share the virtual stage with two amazing youth activists. I'm gonna ask each of you to introduce yourself, maybe say your name, where you're from and where you are currently, the pronouns that you use, and then what's your job? What brings you to this call? And if it's a professional job or if it's just, oh, there we go, we've got Amaya, great. We got you just in time for intros. And I'm gonna kick it off with Tiana. So Tiana, if you wanna tell us your name, where you're from, your pronouns, and what got you, what you do professionally.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. Hey everyone, my name's Tiana Day. I use the pronoun she or her, and I just turned 18 this weekend, so I will be be able to vote this time. It's my first election. I'm very excited. And I'm the founder of Youth Advocates for Change. It's a nonprofit organization based on amplifying youth voices and inspiring local action. I got started, actually, let me give you guys a real authentic rundown of how I got started, because this is a crazy story. So like I said, I just graduated high school in May. It was over YouTube. We were talking about this earlier. And I just saw that video of George Floyd and his death. And I was just I can't even describe how I was feeling like seeing that. I live in the suburbs. I live in the East Bay area in San Ramon. So for the most part, there's not a lot of police brutality in this area, but I definitely was one of the only Black students in my area. And it was very just kind of like foreign to me to see so much hate and so much like just negativity stimulating all over social media regarding the Black Lives Matter movement. And, I was only 17 at the time. I was like, there is literally nothing I can do. I'm like watching these protests. I'm like, this is literally crazy. I have no idea what to do. I want to get involved. Like, I feel like this is wrong for me just to be sitting here in my room in quarantine, watching Netflix all day instead of like being out there and doing something. So in the beginning, I didn't really do anything. And then all of a sudden, all these videos started surfacing of my classmates using racial slurs like the N-word And I was just like, ew, this is so gross. Like, these are people I have over to my house. These are kids that, you know, I play on the same teams with, and there's people that are in my class who are literally racist, but they're posting the black screens for Black Lives Matter on their Instagrams. And I'm like, this is so performative. So I just started calling people out left and right. Like, why are you posting Black Lives Matter if behind closed doors, this is what you do? And I ended up compiling a tweet of over 60 students from my own, only from my high school, who were using racial slurs. And in that, like, the reactions I got from my community, I mean, there's parents who are saying that racism didn't exist in our district. So I was really ready to push that out. And after being silent for so many years of being one of the only Black kids in the area, like feeling this kind of like heavy weight of pressure of, you know, straightening my hair to try to look like my hair is straight and be a blonde hair, blue eye with fair skin, like that's just not me. And I spent so much time trying to pretend to be someone that I wasn't. So I was ready to speak out, and this was very like empowering moment for me. And kids were pissed about it. I mean, parents were upset. There's teachers who were mad. They tried to email the university that I committed to. They had 12 emails trying to get me kicked out of the school. They doxed my information online. Students came to my house and they were trying to egg my house, and we had to get security cameras and take down all the graduation celebration stuff because there's like a target on my back. And there's also a KKK group in the city next to me, and I had an article that went out in them because I was doing all this, and they got a hold of my information. So it was kind of a scary time, but I just had like this fire in me and I wanted to keep going. I was like, what can I do? Because if people in my community are realizing like racism does exist and we have a problem here, like they just didn't know and no one spoke up to be able to say it. So I was like, I'm going to use this momentum that I have and do something with it. So I got invited to speak at a protest in San Ramon, which is in my community. And there's about 3,000 people there. And I've never gone to a protest before. Like I said, I was never an activist, never involved in leadership. Like I was just this normal kid who just wanted to get my diploma and get out of this city. But I ended up speaking at that protest, and it made me feel so like just this aura, and something else came out of me. It was a beautiful feeling, and just the amount of support that people were around me, I wanted to do more and more. I was just so involved. And then a few days later, I saw this ad on Instagram for the Golden Gate Bridge protest.
I'm going to pause you there, Tiana, because I want to get that question. I want to hear more about your first step next in the next question. No, that's awesome.
You'll know later.
Love it. Amazing. Thanks so much. So maybe I'll kick it next to Julian. Julian, name, pronouns, where you're at, and maybe how you got your start in activism as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, firstly, thank you so much, Ben and NextGen, for having me. Really excited to be part of this panel. I'm just going to introduce myself in my language first, and then I'll answer your question. So, wait, up, Julian Brave Noise Cat when squext. And I'll start limp candid eskin which deck went to Oakland, which deck went. Let when poops when the Elliot Washington, D.C. Piscataway Ulu. Hello everyone, my name is Julian Brave Noise Cat. I come from the Secwepemc and Statliunk nations in what is now British Columbia, Canada, but I grew up in Oakland, California, actually just over the hill from San Ramon. I now reside in Washington, D.C., where I wear many hats, and I should add that I go by the pronouns he, him, his. The hats that I wear include the Vice President of Policy and Strategy at a think tank called Data for Progress. I also work with various activist and arts groups. One of them is called the Natural History Museum. Another is called Indian Collective. And then I also do quite a bit of journalism. So I was just telling Ben before this that I have like some edits sitting on the desk right next to me here.
To
get to after this. So yeah, I mean, how did I get involved in activism? To keep it short, I mean, I guess there's a few strands there. Firstly, I'd say growing up as a Native person, I think that I was just inherently exposed to the sort of history and then the responsibility of being the descendants of people who survived a genocide. I think that that's sort of the first strand of that, and that was something that I was raised with when I was very young. Another part of it was growing up in Oakland, honestly. So Oakland is a very politically active place. A lot of social movements originated in Oakland, whether you're talking about the Black Panther Party, the United Farm Workers had deep roots in Northern California. Not very many people know this, but also the Indians of All Tribes, which was a group that occupied Alcatraz Island. And it's actually the 50th anniversary of that occupation right now. Those were all things that I grew up knowing about in the community, and also sort of with some of the people who participated in and led those movements. And so that was a big part of my my upbringing. And then I ended up, I guess, in Washington, D.C., because the sort of indigenous rights movement, was opposing a number of pipelines and extractive industries and projects across the country. And I was variously engaged in those as a, activist participant, and also a writer and journalist, and just sort of following the power and the oil and the money. Sort of up the pipelines, brought me eventually to Washington, D.C., and brought me, I guess, onto the Zoom call. So thanks for having me. Really excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. It's good to have you here. And Amaya, last but not least, can you tell us your name, where you're at, your pronouns, and a little bit how you got started in activism?
Yeah, of course. My name is Amaya Marie Okamoto. I am a visual artist. I'm currently kind of bouncing between, apart from coronavirus pandemic times, usually between Portland, Boston, and New York City. So my pronouns are, I use a she series, and I think my first statement is kind of like, as a young person, especially, we talk about Gen Z and how Gen Z is different, and how a lot of people in my generation and around my age group are, really quote unquote into activism, or everyone's an activist and advocate. I will be the first one to say I have actually very not contentious, but a very, I think, thoughtful relationship with the label activist, and what it means to be an activist today and what it means for the world. I love, the saying, not an activist, just active. And I think that I'm taking that as, one of my, I would say, mottos in my day-to-day life and my progression into doing work within social justice. I'm a visual artist first and foremost, but in my professional bios, when needed, I say visual artist, educator, and organizer. And so a lot of that stemmed from, growing up in a family that, is founded in the values of empathy and doing the most even when you have nothing. So I grew up with a lot of, I think, hard experiences that really really oriented me towards an awareness of race and justice really early on. I was born and raised in New York City and moved to Portland, Oregon, the whitest major city in America, in 2007, after a lot of hard family experiences in New York. And it was a huge, shift for a young Asian girl going from this mecca of diversity to all of a sudden that lily white town. And I grew up in an Asian American family where my mom grew up in Indiana, but she still has this intense value of education. So we lived, in the best school district, which also meant that there's a lot of whiteness and a lot of racism and a lot of, deep-rooted cultural white supremacy that comes from growing up in a state that was the only state founded as a literal whites-only state, which is something that I'm learning later on. That's not taught in schools, right? You don't really know why Oregon and Portland is so effed up, and then you're like, oh my God, it's awful here. Yeah, but I've always done art, and I've always, been creating, and over time in high school, I kind of became a little bit of the, the people's artist and an artistic first responder. Activism was always a big part of my life, you could say, always, working within, social movements. I did a lot of work with Gleason, and there's always, activist stuff, but the work that I'm known for nowadays is mostly creating memorial portraits with organizations that are connected to Black Lives Matter or racialized violence. And that started when I first started working with Don't Shoot Portland in 2015, 2016. And it was just kind of creating memorial portraits with families who had lost loved ones to police violence. And that really, one of the, I'll just do one note, then I'll wrap up, but I think it's important to kind of honor, one of the experiences I had that really, I think, rooted me in this work was the death of Quantas Hayes in February 2017. I was 16 years old at the time. I was sophomore in high school, and Quantates was 17 when he was shot and killed by a police officer a couple, stops away from my where I lived. And I'd worked with Don't Shoot for about, a year or so at that point. And I was able to create a memorial portrait within 24 hours, get that image to the press, get that image kind of rolling in the community before outdated mugshots. And it was, I was able to hand a print to the family and work with that family in advocating for justice with that art. And it really kind of set me on this awareness and understanding of like art in the role of social justice and art in the role of death and healing and memorialization. And so since that moment on, I've really, valued my core statement that has gone viral recently, but I will say I've been using this for years now, is Tony King Bibmar's quote, "The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible." So I don't know what that means yet. I'm still learning what it means for me in the placement of this work. Activism is, obviously a relationship will have for the rest of my life. And I'm trying to figure out my role in that and my role in art and using art to inspire progress.
Awesome. Well, welcome to all of y'all. I will just remind some attendees, you got the Q&A button at the bottom. Feel free to throw anything in there. Panelists, you can throw something in there too. If you're like, Ben, ask me this question. I'm down for that as well. But I do want to kick it off with something, Amaya, you just said, or you just mentioned, which is there is this impression that Gen Z, or the youngest Americans, or maybe international, is a particularly activist-oriented generation, or that there's something special about people who are young today that maybe sets them apart from older cohorts. So I'm sort of curious to get y'all's perspective, like, what is it that you think about your generation, whether it's Gen Z or millennial or whatever, however you define it, that sets you all apart when it comes to activism and politics? And anyone is welcome to start. All right, Tiana, I'm calling on you.
Okay. Well, with me being the youngest panelist, I think I'm 18, newly 18 this week. But I think I always say this in every interview I do, is that the reason why we are so powerful, I think, is because we have social media, and we turn to these social media platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and that's where we get our news from, or at least that's where me and my friends get my news from. I don't watch ABC or CNN. Like, I don't do all that stuff. That's what my parents watch. But for me personally, if something makes my, feed or my Instagram page, then I'm seeing like my friends post about it, and then we're being able to share authentic stories through that post, because the government is controlling our our news station. So everything is going to be biased regardless what anybody thinks, because at the end of the day, they're the people who are putting it on our TVs. If you're going on social media, I can tweet, I'm eating cereal right now, and that's like so real, like raw, like that's exactly what I'm doing. I can post exactly how I'm feeling, like an exact experience. And I think that's what makes it so different right now, is because we can post videos on social media the way George Floyd's death was, put internationally through social media. Like, we are able to see these direct sources right through someone's pure, like their phone. Like, I recorded this video and I'm going to post it for everyone to see. And we're able to do that. Like, I feel my parents' generation was not able to do that. That's something that's new, and that's technology that's helping us spread a word that is the truth to us. And I think it's the most important part about this is we're sharing our stories. It's so much deeper than just activism, or, it's authentic, it's real. And everything that is coming out right now, I think that's what this generation sees, is like, we are able to share our authentic stories. And I am also able to learn from you sharing your authentic story on social media. And we're able to learn from each other and educate each other on our own personal lived experiences.
Totally. What else?
For
yeah,
me.
Maya, go for it. We're doing this casual. It's all good. Go ahead, Maya.
I'm gonna challenge you, Tiana. I pulled something up while you were talking, and I was like, I'm gonna out myself so much right now. Okay, do you see this number?
Yeah.
This says my average screen time at the beginning of September is 12 hours and 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That absolutely terrifies me, that half my day was, more than half my day, I'm sorry, 30 minutes over half my day was spent on an iPhone. I sleep about 10 hours, or 8 to 10 hours, right? Which means I was in the world for an average of 3.5 hours. This was most of the summer for me, because I think so much of what we, say social justice work and activism is nowadays is online. And there's a lot of, this new term, I've been kind of, not for 6 years, is not, 5-6 years is a pretty significant time, but it's not that long, but I've been doing activism for a while, and I have seen, the new terms like digital organizing come about. That was not a term a couple of years ago. Nowadays, this week, my average time is 3 hours. And part of that work was watching this documentary called The Social Dilemma, which I think everyone should watch. And I ended up muting and unfollowing so many people that I felt like were not significant in my life anymore. And now my feed looks like this, because which is kind of crazy, but I muted everyone. And just with that simple act of like muting everyone's posts and stories, I felt like I was in the world all of a sudden, which is very contradictory to what you're saying about how, like, I get all my news on social media, I get all my news this way. And I would say that for, I'm 20 now, 19 years of my life with an iPhone in my hand, that is exactly how I operated. And with, the 2016 election, and with understanding more about how all, the data and, Cambridge Analytica and all these different sources that are actually controlling our feeds, it completely scared the hell out of me. And this was like months ago. This was recent, right? That was like early September. It really scares me that, when we talk about Gen Z, oftentimes everyone's first reaction is to talk about the power of social media. And I think that's a very accurate portrayal. We are the internet generation. We are. Yep. Like, fucking love Instagram, right? But that's also terrifying, because what it means is that everyone has a megaphone, everyone has a voice, which is great, but sometimes that's not great, right? Sometimes it's not good. And so I think when I think of, what makes Gen Z different, what defines Gen Z, I really think it's the internet. I don't really know what that means yet. I'm still unpacking the positive and negatives of that. I sometimes think about how I don't think our generation is anything special in particular. We're just dealt with this internet card, and we're dealt with this tablet in our hand. And this is a lot of power. This is so much power over so many people. Information is power, and this is a lot of information. And we have someone in office right now who says whatever the hell they want on social media, which is sometimes not a great example for 13, 14-year-olds who should not be talking to each other that way.
Totally. Julian, anything to add on that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do a lot of both social and earned media sort of work. Social media is, at the end of the day, as a journalist, and also with our think tank, how we often disseminate our work. Earned media is also an incredibly powerful tool to distribute sort of a message and research and all those sorts of things. At the same time, the ways in which those same channels can be manipulated or be used to manipulate are incredibly concerning to me. And I think that a lot of the sort of dynamics of the last 4 years have borne that out very clearly. I guess that from my perspective, while I think that sort of, digital media has amplified a lot of the sort of stories and messages of the last decade or so. I think I'm probably the oldest person on this panel. As a 27-year-old. Ben and I are probably the oldest people on this Zoom call. I go more towards the sort of events of the last 10 to 15 years as being incredibly formative. Like, it might be true that like social media has amplified a lot of messages and news and stories, and sort of brought those to broader audiences than maybe, and democratized access to those things in ways that, you would not have seen when the media was more centralized and controlled by, cable news networks and newspapers and stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that like, and excuse my language here, but I think that like a lot of the stuff that like millennials and Gen Z have gone through are like pretty fucking crazy. Like I was 9 years old when 9/11 happened. Not long after that, when I was in high school, the Great Recession happened. Donald Trump was elected president, and that was that was one of the first sort of formative political experiences for me. The climate crisis has become increasingly apparent, both in sort of the announcements of scientific studies and also the fact that, the skies over Oakland, where my mom still lives, looked like Blade Runner like 2 weeks ago. I think that combination of sort of the risk of the real risk of right-wing fascism, ecological crisis, economic crisis, also the ways in which the brutalization of primarily Black people at the hands of police, which was something that you didn't usually see in media, but which now is much more easily presented to wide audiences. Like there would not have been as much attention to Black Lives Matter if people did not have now like cameras on them at all times. In fact, I remember when I was in high school, when Oscar Grant was killed by BART cops, like part of the reason that actually became a thing was that this was in 2009, and this was just at the beginning of everybody having a camera phone on them all the time. So there was videos and photos and everything of that incident that came out. So I just think that, like, at the end of the day, I have a very complicated relationship to social media. I've started blocking it on some of my devices. I think it can be used for good. I think it can be used to be bad. But fundamentally, I think what's actually shaping our generation are these insane things that are happening out in the real world. It's just a really tumultuous time to come of age, I think. Like, it's a crazy moment in world history.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think it really tees up our next question nicely. And I say this as the 31-year-old grandpa of the panel. We at NextGen and many of y'all are really focused on the election as like the next sort of pivot point where we can really make change as a generation. There are more young people eligible to vote than any other age cohort, but frankly, they turn out at half the rates of older folks. And so I think some of that is potentially changing, and the work that we do at NextGen is all about trying to make that change. I'm curious from you all, are you hopeful or optimistic that our politics is up to the task of changing these multitude of crises that you're talking about that we have to confront? Or do you think our current politics is totally broken and there's no way to redeem it, and no matter what, we're screwed? Or somewhere in the middle? I'm sort of curious. Amelia, do you want to start on that one?
Can you repeat the question really quickly?
Yeah, no worries. Are you hopeful that our politics can help solve some of these problems that we face as a generation, or is politics not the right avenue to make this happen? Or does it not have a role to play?
Okay, yes, okay. Perfect question, great question. That is a terrifying question. I read a recent op-ed by Robert Reich a couple of days ago about, how there might be a civil war upon us very soon. I felt like a conspiracy theorist for the longest time in the past couple of weeks about the fact that, I think I am at a point where I see a lot of potential scary violence in our future that I think a lot of people in America have not seen or am not even conceptualizing. And I will say, politics, I went through a period of time this summer where I was like art. And when I ever have an artsy photo shoot and photographers are like, oh, like, what are you comfortable with? My answer is always, well, I'm not running for president one day. I'm not running for office. But now, this past summer, I was like, holy cow, like watching AOC and like all the recordings and the videos, I was like, maybe I need to go into politics. Maybe I should reorient from sociology and all this stuff and go to law school. And then I realized we don't have time for that. And that was a really scary realization for me, is that we don't have time for that. It's not even that we don't have time because, Donald Trump is in office and my rights to my body are being taken away. Or it's not that, like Julian was saying, it's like, we don't have time. Like, even the question, are you going to have kids, for my generation is a moral, ethical question. You know, are you going to bring someone into this world even though we have like 30 years left on this planet? I'm at a very controversial point in my life where I feel like we need a huge, radical, crazy shift. I don't know the answer to that. I don't necessarily say that violence is the answer, but I don't think that the way that politics are happening right now is how, you know, we're gonna make change that is not only needed for, you know, people to be protected, but needed because our world is quite literally melting. And you know, social climate change, you know, we can talk all we want about politics, we can talk all we want about identity politics, and that's my interest. Racial justice is my interest. I'm from Oregon. I wish I cared about climate change so much more. I think we should all care about climate change so much more. That should be on the forefront issues of every single step we take right now. It's not on mine, but I admit that. Yeah, no, I mean, this is a very winding answer to know. I don't think traditional politics is how we need to move forward, but I don't know what the answer is. I'm not
Super
terrified.
fair. It's totally okay to not know. What about y'all, Tiana or Julian? Do you agree with the mayor, or are we gonna have a little scuttlebutt here?
I definitely am 110,000% on the same wavelength as you are. Like this, I was talking about earlier, like I'm just now kind of getting into the world of politics and kind of understand, and I have so much to learn, and I'm telling you guys, I'm right at the base, like I'm just starting out, and it's really, really scary going into this, like as my first election, being like, there are so many things that there's so much pressure on this election, and there's so much pressure in this time period as a whole. I mean, there are people still dying from COVID. Like there's, you know, California's on fire outside. There's ash on my car this morning. Like, you know, it's terrifying. There's so many things that are happening, and I can't say that I know enough about politics to say that maybe that is the answer, but I completely agree where I feel like we're on the brink of a civil war if Trump is reelected. I definitely think that is going to happen. I don't want to like manifest it because I really hate violence, all kinds of it. And I mean, in my protests, I'm always holding a poster that says lead with love. Like I live my life through it. And it's terrifying to me because like as a Black American, where, you know, right now we are targeted by a lot of groups, and there's a lot of like just scary stuff going on, especially, and as a Black woman on top of that too, with like my rights being possibly taken away from me to my own body with what this election is coming about. It's just like, it is so, I try to stay optimistic and like positive about the future. But when I think about it, like every single time I'm on the front lines, I'm out there protesting, it's literally because I don't want to see my children. I don't want to get that call one day hearing that my son died due to police brutality. Like that is my biggest fear, is knowing I could have done something today to help my children's future. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what my future is going to look like. I don't even know if I'm going to live till, you know, next year at this point. Like it is a really scary time with everything going on, and it's like she said, like I just don't know, and I don't really know where to turn. I hate being that type of person that's like, you know, like kind of sad about stuff, but like this topic is so sad, and it's just very like depressing, and it's that one thing that irks me at the end of the night. Like it's scary. I don't know what to expect for the future.
Super fair. Julian, anything to add?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always feel it's like hard, I think, to make the pitch for a very broken political system and process to young people. And I think it's a hard thing that I think increasingly like young politically active people are kind of like asked to do, you know, like explain to young people why they should vote in an electoral process that says we want to make it as difficult as possible for you to vote, and where, you know, you will not feel represented in terms of your views or even your like demographics, right? I think it's gotten a little bit easier probably in recent years to make the pitch than it used to be. When I was the first election I could vote in was 2012, if you just do the math on my age. And, you know, I would say that at that point, I was already feeling pretty sort of disaffected and disillusioned by politics and what it could do. And, you know, it wasn't until I would say the 2016 Democratic Party primary when I actually felt that like some views that I held could be represented on a national stage. And that was when, you know, Bernie Sanders was running for president and was saying a number of things that I believed and agreed with that I did not think a Democrat could stand on that stage and say and get away with. And you know, so I think since then it has felt a little bit easier. There are increasingly more and more, you know, politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's just a few years older than I am, you know, the members of the squad, and then also sort of native politicians like Deb Haaland, et cetera, who do make me feel more represented and more like, you know, hey, look, like there are folks who can go into the political process and represent you and your views and your generation, all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, you know, I would be lying if I didn't say that process is still incredibly frustrating. And, you know, you basically in politics, you like run headlong into the wall, you know, hoping that it's gonna move an inch and knowing full well that it's a wall. And, you know, I think that can be really dispiriting for people who come at it from the perspective that I think a lot of people of our generation come at it from, which is, you know, perspective of wanting our political systems and processes to just be a little more just, you know, to like deliver outcomes that make a difference for, you know, the people who really deserve it. You know, working people of color, women, you know, like all of the folks who have been most brutalized by our society and our political systems and processes. And unfortunately, like it's really hard to take that intention and the same thing that brought me, I will say, into politics and then like see it happen in the real world, because there are so many forces aligned against that. And asking people, you know, asking young people to like buy into a process that's set up that way, it's a hard task. You know, I totally understand why people would see that and be turned away. But at the end of the day, you know, I find myself always coming back to it because I don't personally see any other way. And at the end of the day, you know, we might as well vote right now because like, I don't know how much longer they're going to let people who look like us and who are our age and hold our views, you know, how much longer they're going to let us vote. And, you know, we might as well, you know, give it our best shot right now because there's lots of people out there that are counting on us, including people in the future, right? So it's a very maddening, very frustrating thing to be engaged in, especially if you're coming at it, from my view, for the right reasons. But I think we all have sort of a responsibility to do it in the ways that we can and with the skills that we have.
Yeah, Maya, jump in here.
Yes, I want to make it very clear my advocacy for us to reject our political system does not mean that you should not vote. I think voting is, recently I'm working with this org called Move On, and I had to record this video about like why I vote and whatnot. And I said like all this crazy stuff that's happening, but even when I feel like I don't have a voice, I still have a vote. You know, that's the power of American democracy, supposedly, is we're supposed to have a government that works on our terms. That is not happening right now. It's not on our terms, and that terrifies me. You know, I'm you know, the product of immigrants who came to America for, you know, the hope of a better future, a more just world, a more just government. That's not the reality. I think I'm the type of person, you know, especially an artist maybe, who has always, you know, walked through the world with the belief in justice and the belief in an equilibrium that will eventually happen, but a more intense belief in people and a more intense belief in empathy, that I can do the right thing and the people around me will do the right thing. That reality of mine and that little rose-colored goggle view that I had was completely shattered this summer. when I spent my time in Portland, Oregon. I am 20 years old. I should not own a bunch of gas masks, should not own riot gear, should not have, 3 different, I need my colorways, very fashionable, 3 different color options for like, helmets to go to the protests at night. Should not, I shouldn't have a hockey stick. I didn't even know you're supposed to have hockey sticks at riots. That's terrifying. I'm outing myself for going to riots right now, but the riots. But watching police officers and federal police officers do things that are completely just nonsensical, it really, I think, shook my idea of ethics in the justice system today. Yeah.
I want to pick up on some of that though, and something that honestly all of you all said, where the world is scary, there's a lot of bad things happening, and it's unclear whether anything we can do will make a difference. And that's a terrifying realization that I think many of us, regardless of age, have in this country. I'm curious, you all also mentioned some kernels of optimism and hope, and so I'm curious, what is it that you are hopeful about? Maybe it was an action you were a part of or an interaction that you saw take place. Like, tell me a little bit more about something that made you hopeful for the future of the country. And Tiana, I know I interrupted when you were talking about a big action you were a part of, so I don't know if that's what you were going to say, but maybe you want to bring that up?
Yep, it was exactly what I was going to say. So as we were talking earlier about how I got involved in the activism, I decided I was going to lead this protest. There was this protest on the Golden Gate Bridge, and this girl was like, we need a leader from the Black community to lead it. We're going to cancel the event. It's tomorrow. So this is 18 hours before. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to show up tomorrow and I'm going to lead this protest. And everyone's looking at me like, this is literally crazy. Like, I made a flyer. I posted it on social media. And 18 hours later, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to lead this protest. I don't know how many people are going to come. I bought 3 cases of water. I thought that was going to be enough. The next morning, I show up and there's 50,000 people walking across the Golden Gate Bridge with me. My first protest I've ever led. I was 17 years old, had no idea really what I was doing. I mean, I brought 3 cases of water bottles thinking I was going to have to carry the rest across the Golden Gate Bridge. And honestly, it was not a lot of Black people, it was more allies, and it was beautiful. I was crying. I was like, this is what I need to be doing. This is what got me into activism. And I have to remember when I have those low moments that that's what started me. That's what got me involved. Was there were 50,000 people with 18 hours notice who showed up and out for the Black community, saying, that they were in solidarity to it. They were supporting it. And there's people who are like-minded like me. There's a big number. Like, although there's a huge number of very powerful individuals who are controlling our country right now, there's also a lot of people who are on the opposing side, on my side, who are fighting with me and will continue to. And we have strong leaders. We have amazing youth activists, and we have amazing, just like, I just think our generation is just so smart. And I think we are smarter than a lot of the older generations because we are taking it upon ourselves to educate each other and educate ourselves and do things like starting nonprofits like I started mine. And, my whole objective is to literally educate the youth and to diversify our education, teach the stories of Black, the Indigenous, people of color. Like, we need to be learning that Christopher Columbus was not our hero, and we should not be idolizing people who are stealing from the Indigenous people. We should not be talking about white narratives 24/7, talking about the slavery union from a white person's perspective, because there were also Black people who had their own values, their own stories, and we need to be sharing those. We need to be talking about people who aren't just white, and we don't need to be talking about white America, and that is just bringing out all the white supremacy out here. And that's really why I founded that nonprofit. And I'm like, I'm gonna find a way to educate children and bring that into it, because the youth is so powerful. We just need outlets to bring this power. We just need to come together as one. And I'm so hopeful for our future. With that being said, because there's so many of us that have this, everyone has downtime right now. We are literally in quarantine. paused. We can't go to work, can't go to school, you know, I can't go out with my friends, I can't, you know, people can't go to clubs. Like, we are literally have to sit here, and we are surrounded by all this negative energy, all this pressure of this election, all this brutality, all of these terrible things going on in other countries and stuff happening within our own country. There's so much, and we're forced to sit here and watch it. And there's people who are saying, no, I can't watch it, I'm going to do something. So I think that I can put my faith into those people, because that's what inspires me to keep going. And that's why I want to be out here on the front lines and doing all this extra work. Although it is so freaking draining, I'm sure you guys can all agree with me that this is not an easy field to be in. Like, this is the most draining thing that I've ever done. And I know that it's a tough road. It's a very hard road to be on, but it's not for the faint of heart. And it's for people who can do that, people who have that resilience in them. And there's so many of us that I think have that. And as I do more of these panels and interviews, I'm meeting more people that inspire me, like the two of you guys. So I feel good. I feel okay. Like, although it's scary, I feel okay about it.
Nice. Julian, how about you? What's one thing that you've seen or been a part of that gives you hope or some optimism for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think having the opportunity to participate in and write about a number of social movements at this point, whether that be, you know, the No DAPL movement at Standing Rock, the movement against the Dakota Access Pipeline. You know, I both participated in some actions and did some writing about that. And the story of the origins of that movement with a group of young people from the Standing Rock Reservation, you know, one of the poorest places in the country, initiating a run. The first thing that they did was they led a run to the Army Corps of Engineers office in Omaha, Nebraska, and then a second one to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness about the pipeline, you know, before it was really news or anyone was paying attention to it. That's a really inspiring story, that a group of young people, you know, educated themselves about this problem, this injustice that was facing their community, and they took action and they turned it into not just a national story but a global story. I mean, that's a really remarkable just narrative that I think can be really inspiring for young people who get involved in this kind of work. You know, I think in other instances, like I wrote a story about the Moms for Housing movement earlier this year. That was a movement led by homeless and housing insecure Black mothers in Oakland who reoccupied property that was owned by a house flipping corporation. And they did that to raise awareness for the housing crisis in Oakland and the Bay Area and nationally, and also to call to attention the fact that, like, in the, you know, the richest region at this point in the United States, the richest country in the world, we are leaving people, thousands of people, unsheltered every single night. And that is a choice that we're making. It's not you know, some sort of market externality or whatever. That's like a choice. That's a policy choice. That was really inspiring, and just thinking about the ways that those women organized, who were in enormous duress, you know, who were literally facing homelessness. That was a really inspiring thing. And then, you know, being here in DC, also, I knew a number of the leaders of the Sunrise Movement before people knew what the Sunrise Movement was. I actually remember when I first met Evan Weber, who was the political director of the Sunrise Movement. He was like one of the first people who I met when I started a job at an organization called 350.org. And I remember my boss distinctly asking him what the name of his organization was. Like, we were doing like a little meet and greet type, like, you know, this is a partner organization we work with. And he says, what name did you guys choose again? He said, we're the Sunrise Movement. And like a little over a year later, they were, you know, leading a sit-in in soon to be Speaker Pelosi's office, and, you know, launching the Green New Deal, and really sort of like kickstarting a new era in at least like the politics of climate change in this country. So, you know, I think I've seen a number of examples of activism really working, and anyone who's done activism knows that it's a very low low shooting percentage kind of sport. Yeah, I don't know. NBA playoffs are on right now, so that was the metaphor.
It
And
works. It landed.
Yeah, but like, you know, seeing it work in a number of places and times has been really inspiring. And then also just, you know, the kind of community that gets built among people who have common interest and who you know, develop really deep relationships around these things. You know, last week I was on a birthday Zoom call for a friend and mentor of mine who was turning 80 years old. This is a guy who was one of the first Native people in the country to get a law degree, and who, you know, spent his life, you know, fighting for Native rights, and then also, you know, creating opportunities for other people and creating connections for other people and making sure that those things carried forward. And I think in those kinds of small like interactions, the generosity and empathy and compassion of people towards each other, I think that there's enormous potential there as well. And that definitely keeps me going.
Awesome. Lots of reasons to be hopeful. Amaya, anything you'd add to the pile?
Yes. You asked if we were hopeful, and I will say, like, yes, absolutely, because oftentimes I think that's all I have. When you're talking, I pulled up really quickly. Do you know Carl Walker? She's an amazing amazing American artist, completely amazing. Her work deals a lot with like a lot of historical context, like historical slavery and dealing with, you know, the new and the now and whatnot. She's amazing. But basically, all her work is rooted in race and social justice. And she recently did this interview with Vogue about hope. And I just like, is kind of like in this world of explanations and constant explanations. You know, we will live in a world that constantly explains explanation, like asks for explanations. How do you deal with that with art? I'm gonna read a really short snippet. She says, you know, she talks about making all these sketches. And she says, it's a hopeful act, an attentive and often surprising exercise I forget to do for long stretches. But when the world concentrates so much violence, ignorance, and mind games into little digital devices we are compelled to carry, I'm grateful to have this simple analog product at my fingertips. And basically what she's saying is that we live in this world that's like completely crazy, right? Like what Julian was saying is like millennials, Gen Z, like, yo, we've been hit by Mack trucks over and over again. You know, the class of 2016 went in freshman year with Donald Trump as president, and now leaving college into the real world with no job opportunities and a bunch of debt, right? Like we have generations that are completely screwed right now. But you know what Kara is saying is that, you know, in this crazy world is like she has to do something that gives her hope. I think so much of that is because sometimes I have this strong belief that the scariest thing ever is a person that has nothing to lose. I witnessed this a lot this summer when it came to a lot of the violence that was happening in Portland. And I witnessed this a lot when it comes to, violence or gang violence or whatnot. Is the scariest thing is somebody that has nothing to lose, in my opinion. And so I think that, you know, as young people, as impressionable young people, for me, I really hope that people take time to reflect and do their little analog sketches and make sure that they still have hope, because that is all, you know, at a certain point, that's all we're going to have. We don't know what's going to happen in November. But hope might be all we can have. And as long as we don't die, we just got to keep moving forward.
Amen.
Doing what we can. Yeah.
That is awesome. I appreciated each of those things. I feel like we got to a dark place and then we just brought ourselves right back out. So that feels really good. I think what I want to do next is try and get a few rapid fire questions so we can get some nuggets of wisdom from y'all. So I've got a series of questions I've got that I'm hoping that we can just give quick, pithy answers, and they're not that easy. So be smart. Good luck. I guess the first thing I'd ask, and I'm just super curious, you know, when Joe Biden's obviously a 77-year-old candidate for president, he picked Kamala Harris to be his VP, who is a younger woman from California, for like many of us on the call. Sort of curious, like, what do you think of Kamala Harris? Good, bad, neither? Who cares? We'll start with Tiana.
I'm like a very about her, because obviously, I mean, yes, we want representation in the White House, of course. Like, we need representation, we need a woman, and we need more people of color as well. So of course I'm all there for that. But there's some things that she said that I just definitely don't agree with. And I feel like, obviously, I mean, no surprise here, I'm going to be voting for Biden and Harris. But I mean, when it comes to just like the way I see this election is, at the end of the day, where either there's no good choice. I mean, there's no like perfect,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
There's no perfect choice in my opinion. It's just like the more correct choice.
Okay.
And
So we're going to go with
that's it.
And then I'm going to go next. Julian, Kamal Harris, what's your thought?
You know, I guess the question is like I get to see a lot of these politicians and the things they do a little close up. And I guess the question to me is like, which Senator Harris are we getting? You know, I think the Senator Harris who participated as a prosecutor in the 90s in California is, you know, having grown up there and knowing what that means, that's not really the kind of thing that I'm super into. But the Senator Harris who, you know, worked with Representative Ocasio-Cortez on the Climate Equity Act, you know, has made herself into a voice for environmental justice, specifically racial justice more broadly. I'm definitely more supportive of that kind of thing. And, you know, I'm hopeful that given the way that the Democratic Party seems to be moving towards more progressive positions, that Senator Harris, who seems to be very politically savvy, will sort of read the tea leaves and move in that direction as well.
All right, we got it depends who shows up. Amaya?
My statement is we need to do what we can to move forward. And these are the cards that we're dealt with. And so we're going to do our best to move forward. I will also note that I think that we live in a culture and generation that demands a lot from people. And cancel culture is the scariest plague. Cancel culture and clout is the scariest plague thing that is plaguing our generation. It is a very strange thing that exists in our world right now. Social media is powerful and social media is terrifying. And I am in no interest. I have no interest in making excuses for anybody, and I have no interest in making excuses for somebody who will have so much power if they were elected president or vice president of the United States. However, I will say that people evolve, and I think that we need to step back and give people grace, and we need to think about how you know, the term defund the police. And certain social justice, correct values in our world today, I think, are things that did not even exist 5-10 years ago.
Totally.
So yeah, that is my,
all right,
we need to do what we can to move forward.
Totally. Next rapid response. What's one political issue that you think is completely underreported or under talked about? And we'll start with Julian.
Climate change. I think it's underreported. I also don't think that the ways in which we talk about it are good. There was and who we have talking about it. So there's a Media Matters study, for example, that showed that even when cable news does talk about climate change, which is incredibly infrequently, the folks who they have on to talk about it are almost entirely white and overwhelmingly male. So climate would be my answer on that one.
Got it. Amaya, you're next.
Climate change, absolutely, Julian. I think that, you know, I was telling my mom a little bit ago, ignorant Amaya. So I was like, I just wish I cared about climate change more. Like everything I do is, I just care about race. Like race is my thing, right? But everything is intersectional. And who are the people affected most by climate change? Who are the people being pushed out? New York City is sinking, right? The fire, Oregon, you know, got hit with protests, and the Oregon wildfires just wrecked Southern Oregon. You know, we need to talk about climate change. Everyone needs to talk about climate change. Yeah.
Got it. Tiana?
Right there with you guys. Enough said. Climate change it is.
Interesting. The triple threat, the trifecta. Okay, I think I'm looking at the time. We're at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. So I'm going to do one last question for y'all. What is one thing that you wish older people recognized about our generation that you think would help us get if older people could just understand this one thing, maybe then we'd be in a better spot. And Tiana, we'll start with you.
Put yourself in other people's shoes. With everything that we are going through as the two generations, if you are able, that's, I think, the biggest lesson I've learned as well. On top of that is just, I used to be someone who was very full of judgment. I judged everyone, and that's okay to, it's okay to make mistakes, and you need to, hold yourself accountable for them. And I think that's what the older generations need to do when they're constantly attacking views that, the younger generations do have. I think they need to be putting themselves in the shoes of other people and understanding there's a side to every single story, and you need to be able to see all views before you can kind of create your own. You need to be able to see where everyone comes from. And then with that knowledge of, being like, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from and I can kind of see your perspective, then you can go ahead and make your own. But, we need to do that first as all people, but especially I feel like the older generation that attacks the younger ones.
Super helpful. Amaya, how about you? One thing.
Understand what the word radical means and question everything. I think that again, social media, right? We live in an internet world. This is crazy. The amount of power Instagram has. I remember there's one line from You Gotta Watch The Social Dilemma, which is, if it's free, it means you are the product. What social media does is the power that has to change everyone's behavior just slightly, but across the world, that's insane. So older generation, people who do not understand or don't have social media or don't understand the power of the smartphone, question everything. Be radical.
Nice.
We need to question everything.
Is Social Dilemma on Netflix? I'll watch it tonight.
Yes, it is. It will make you cry like 10 times.
I'm ready. I'm ready. What
You're gonna delete all your apps and then re-download them in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
We got our homework assignment. Julian, bring us home. One thing that you wish older folks could do or knew?
Yeah, I guess I was trying to think about what a good answer to this question would be. And I think that there's a lot of anxiety and fear that happens in sort of generational and demographic change. I think that that's core to the story of what's happening in the United States. If you look at the survey data, it's core to the story of what's happening like globally in a lot of sort of Western democracies. And I guess, if there was some way to convince older people and older voters that they have nothing to fear from young people, they have nothing to fear from social, demographic, racial, cultural change. And in fact, actually, that they have a lot to benefit. If you think about the kinds of policies and investments in a real sort of social safety net and welfare state that young millennial progressive politicians and people are overwhelmingly saying that they want and they support and are developing ideas to make happen, those will disproportionately benefit actually older people who need greater access to healthcare or need support from workers in the care economy, and sort of deserve those things. And so, I just wish that if there was some sort of way to get people's away from their anxiety and acknowledging that actually, young people are fighting for a lot of things that will do you a lot of good, and maybe you should listen to their perspectives and the policies that their favorite politicians are championing and that sort of thing. That would be my message. But of course, the problem begins with the fact that older people don't really want to listen to younger people. So
we'll leave it there then. I think that's super powerful. So before I kick it to Julia, I want to say thanks to the team at World Affairs for pulling us together. Thanks to everyone who's stuck with us. With 28 days left till the election, we got a lot on our minds, a lot on our plates. Julian has to get back to his edit, but I do want to say thanks to everyone who was able to join. And then kick it back to Julia.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. And thank you so much to our panelists, Tiana, Julian, and Amaya. I frankly am feeling grateful and optimistic that, our youngest generations are here to help lead us into a new era, hopefully outlined by, love and empathy. So I also want to thank NextGen America for helping us pull this panel together. We at World Affairs are super grateful to have you all here. And we're glad you can come and join us today to talk about some of these, super important issues. And to those who joined us today, thank you. We hope you enjoyed the program. Come back on Thursday. We're having another program here at World Affairs with political satirist and author P.G. O'Rourke. It should be a laugh. It should be fun, and hopefully something a little lighter in this kind of atmosphere right now that's a little, as the panelists have outlined, kind of scary. So join us on Thursday. You can RSVP at worldaffairs.org/events, and have a great rest of your evening. Thanks again for joining us, and bye. Thanks panelists, Tiana, Julian.
Bye. Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you. Thank you, Ben. Bye, y'all.
So much.